Special thanks to Tokyo Treat and Sakura for sponsoring today's video. Alright, now that the excitement and fervour surrounding the 1000-Year Blood War Arc anime Part 3 has settled down a bit, it's time for arguably my favourite part of a new trailer drop. The frame-by-frame, in-depth breakdown, where we attempt to uncover absolutely everything the new trailer is hiding. And there's no denying it, this was an awesome trailer for a number of reasons. Perhaps the biggest of the bunch is the fact that this trailer leaned heavily into teasing some of the new additions that will be coming to the story during Part 3, of which we know there will be quite a lot. It's fairly clear already that while Parts 1 and 2 introduced a few changes here and there, with the amount of new additions ramping up over the course of those first 26 episodes, from Part 3 onwards, we might be staring down the barrel of a very different 1000-Year Blood War Arc landscape. So join me as we attempt to identify every scene, every existing shot that we come across in the new trailer, while I try my best to piece together a timeline of what's going on during certain sequences. Just how transformative are some of these new set pieces, and what do they mean for the overall narrative of Bleach's final arc? Without further ado, grab yourselves a drink, settle in, and let's get started. Of course, before we begin, as if it really needs to be said, this will be a full spoiler breakdown. I will be spoiling basically everything that's going to happen in the 1000-Year Blood War Arc that's left to come, so just be aware of that before we begin. Now, the trailer begins with a celebration of Bleach's most famous ability, Bankai. While this is merely a recap of every Bankai we've seen during the 1000-Year Blood War Arc anime so far, and it is very impressive to look at, it's all leading up to one big moment in Part 3. The release of KYORAKU'S Bankai against Lille Barrow, possibly one of the most anticipated Bankai reveals of them all. However, just before that, the trailer opens in earnest with a brief shot of KYORAKU sprinting across the Quincy landscape. Initially, I thought this was an adaptation of the shot of KYORAKU leading the charge of the Gote and their allies from chapter 629, right at the start of the Varvelt arc. However, I no longer think that's the case. Because Kyoraku Shikai is clearly already active in this shot, I'm instead assuming this is taking place during his battle with Lille. Now, it could be a new sequence. One thing we do know is that whenever it takes place, it is fairly early on in the battle, as KYORAKU is still wearing his hat, which he only loses once Lille activates his holy form and successfully snipes the captain several times. So that leaves us with a couple of options. Either this is a totally new scene from the fight, which is completely possible, or it's an altered angle of either KYORAKU making his way towards Lille's vantage point using Daruma-san Gakoronda, or KYORAKU running to the side of Lille. After this, though, we get the money shot. An injured KYORAKU readies his blades, pointing them both downwards in front of him as he prepares to activate Bankai. Now, we don't actually get a close-up of KYORAKU holding his blades like that in the source material. Instead, it's only seen from afar. However, the following close-up of KYORAKU's face as he calls out Bankai is taken straight from the cliffhanger ending of chapter 647 and looks fantastic. I can't wait to see this in action, and as I mentioned in my live reaction, the art is brilliant, really emulating Kubo's own work. Quick side note, I do wonder what's causing the sky of Varvelt to emit such a purple glow. It would make sense if this were after Askin activates his Gift Bear-like ability, his Gift Ball Deluxe, but it's not. Obviously, the red sky during Part 2 was a result of the Vandenreich switching the Seirete with their Shadow Realm city, but here, in the transformed Royal Palace, shouldn't it still just be the normal blue sky? Unless the Quincy's taking over has somehow drenched the world in a sinister purple hue. I guess we'll have to see, but it does make identifying certain scenes a little easier. Up next, we have what looks like a bit of editing trickery going on here. I think we have two separate fights being spliced together, though I could be mistaken. First up, when the lighting is bright, I think we are seeing an extended version of Ichigo versus Yhwach. The hefty amount of smoke and dust swirling around Ichigo as he flies towards the screen implies to me that this is just after Ichigo has unleashed his massive Getsuga Tensho, which demolishes a large portion of the palace roof, presumably then letting the sunlight in at the same time. In fact, we see Ichigo about to release this very same Getsuga at the end of the trailer. However, this actual shot of Ichigo emerging from the smoke like this is brand new, which makes me think the fight is being extended. And yet, after this, we immediately transition to a separate fight taking place right after Ichigo's clash with Yhwach. Ichigo versus Uryū. Yes, after I harped on about it for so long during the lead up to part 2, only to be disappointed, it looks like we're actually going to get it after all. In a lovely piece of animation, Ichigo is seen deflecting numerous holy arrows with his blades, twisting and turning on the spot to strike them all down. This isn't in the source material, but it's clearly Uryū that is shooting Ichigo. No other Quincy in the vicinity fires arrows quite like that, and it's an extension of their small showdown in the original version of chapter 619. So allow me to briefly draw up a timeline of events for you. In the original version of chapter 619, the chapter opens with the aftermath of Ichigo's Getsuga. He and Yhwach clash very briefly before Yhwach turns his attention to Mimihagi. In the anime, it looks like this struggle between the two of them will be extended. In the second half of chapter 619, Ichigo squares off with a defiant Uryū, who even shoots a solitary arrow at his former friend. In the source material, Ichigo and Uryū's confrontation barely gets off the ground. But here, it looks like they will fight for real after Ichigo versus Yhwach, and you can see briefly during the scene of Ichigo deflecting the arrows that much of the ceiling behind him is gone, the result of his earlier Getsuga. Now, admittedly, as Ichigo continues to block Uryū's arrows, there is a lot of smoke surrounding him here too, so that earlier shot of him flying out of the smoke and dust and into the light could actually be during his battle with Uryū. We've got no way of knowing for sure, as this is all new material. In fact, there's a shot of Uryū later on in this trailer in the same lighting that would maybe confirm that fact. Either way though, their fight looks pretty stunning already. Ichigo deflects and blocks numerous arrows before rolling out of the way, sprinting around the arena as Uryū continues to blast him, tearing up the ground behind Ichigo in a sequence of sparkling blue explosions. But we then cut back to Ichigo once more when he's outside the palace, with the natural lighting once again. And it seems as he charges a brilliant golden Getsuga upon his blade that he is fighting Yhwach now once more. Ichigo swings his sword seemingly at Yhwach's face, but wait, something's not right here. Yhwach doesn't have the Almighty in this shot. Now that doesn't make sense. There's no point in this part of the story where Ichigo faces Yhwach without the Almighty in play in some form or another. So what could this be? It almost feels like a mistake, but the emphasis on Yhwach's eye makes me think that's unlikely. Instead, it almost feels like our attention is being purposefully drawn to Yhwach's eye in this shot. I wonder. The only thing I can think of, and I racked my brain about this is another new, earlier premonition of Yhwach's. In chapter 672, Yhwach has a dream where he is slashed by Ichigo. It's not actually a dream, Hashwolf is kind of relaying him a vision of the future that he has seen through the Almighty, but in that vision, both Ichigo and Yhwach appear as their older selves, with Yhwach not having any semblance of the Almighty at the time. Now, in this particular trailer shot, neither Ichigo nor Yhwach look any different to usual, save for Yhwach's eyes, so I'm really not sure. Maybe it is just a mistake. We then transition to Ichibei using his ultimate ability Futen Taisatsuryo at the end of his battle with Yhwach, which will feature in the first episode of the Cour. I absolutely love the visual style on show here. There's a painterly look to the image, a striking monochromatic appearance, save for the outlines, which are drawn in a brilliant blood red. It really helps to set Ichibei's power apart from the others, as ink blots and spills fill the air around him. Presumably, this darkness only sets in once Ichibei has called to him an enormous torrent of black, which he needs in order to unleash his ability, as we see here once he begins chanting the incantation. During the ritual process in the source material, we see Ichibei surrounded by several rings of black ink. However, the anime has inverted the colours, surrounding Ichibei with rings of white as darkness descends around him. The graves of Futen Taisatsuryo also appear around him as well, springing out of those rings on the ground, while in the original chapter we don't see any of them until the double-page spread reveal of the mausoleum itself. Now, next up we have another new shot, and I wonder if this is an indication of how the team plans to extend Ichibei's battle. In the source material, upon activating Futen Taisatsuryo, Ichibei, well, he doesn't really do anything, he's instantly beaten. Here, though, we see the leader of the Zero Division flying through the air with his blade outstretched, clearly while the ability is still active. In the foreground, I think we can see what is Yhwach's own outstretched hand as Ichibei appears through the gaps in the Quincy King's fingers. So this is possibly the moment Ichibei dies if Yhwach has already raised his hand to him. That being said, it's possible the fight may just continue extended regardless. Interestingly, as I mentioned in my live reaction, this shot of Ichibei flying towards Yhwach seems to be connected to a shot from one of the original trailers, where we see Ichibei's blade rushing towards Yhwach, but from Ichibei's perspective instead. The coloration was totally normal then too. I imagine this shot still exists and will probably still be in the episode, but it'll likely now be in the black, white, grey and red colours of Futen Taisatsuryo in the actual episode instead. In the background, as this scene plays out, we hear Ichibei saying, "That's what peace is all about. Isn't that right, Yhwach?" This is Ichibei's final line in the source material from his brief appearance in chapter 613, and I hope the anime finds an organic way to keep him around this time instead, rather than just have him disappear unceremoniously. Next up, we see a shot of Yhwach standing amidst a massive wave of smoke at what appears to be the top of the royal palace, and again, this must be the cliffhanger of chapter 618, where Yhwach stands in the aftermath of Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho. Interestingly though, Yhwach is holding his broadsword here in the anime, where in the source material I don't believe he has it at all during this sequence. In fact, I believe the last time we see his broadsword is when he uses it to stab Ichibei, and after that it seems to vanish. Next up, we get an awesome shot of Yhwach unleashing his power as he throws his arms outwards, blue reishi flame exploding from each hand. As I mentioned before, you might recognise this shot. This shot of Yhwach is taken directly from the first opening of all places, but I do like it, so I don't mind seeing the animation reused here. What interests me most, though, is what's actually going on here. The trailer tries to make it look like this moment leads directly into Yhwach then charging at Ichigo, but again, I think there's a bit of trickery going on here. Instead, I think this moment could be a lot earlier than that. What if this is Yhwach preparing to stab his father? In the source material, it's an extremely understated moment, considering how big of a deal the death of the Soul King actually is in universe, so I wonder if the anime is doing its best to try and make it feel a bit grander. However, at the same time, I wonder if this could be Yhwach preparing to take on Ichigo and his friends, as it does look like the drapes of the Soul King's chamber are actually behind Yhwach at this point. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure with this one. But we then see Yhwach charging his Reiatsu as the ground around him explodes before he lunges for Ichigo, the two clashing as Yhwach forces Ichigo from the side of the palace and out into the sky. Now, it's again hard to say if these scenes are actually sequential in the way the trailer depicts them, but I'm inclined to say they are this time. As mentioned, Yhwach is holding his broadsword as he flexes his power, so this is unlikely to be the same scene as the prior shot of the Quincy King. Interestingly, this is again all new, and Yhwach is being far more aggressive here than he was in the original chapters. In fact, Yhwach is surprisingly passive when it comes to Ichigo and his friends in the source material, so I'm very excited to see him taking a more forthcoming and upfront role here in the anime. It looks to me that as part of their extended fight, Yhwach is going to be applying the pressure on Ichigo a lot more. We can see that Ichigo is surrounded by open air and rubble as Yhwach lunges for him, making me think that this is again immediately after Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho. As we can see ever so briefly as Yhwach forces Ichigo away, there's one of the Zeroban Riden in the background, meaning the two of them take their fight quite far away from the palace itself. Interesting when you consider Ichigo doesn't actually leave the palace in the source material until he's forcibly thrown from it by Uryū. But as Ichigo and Yhwach break away from one another, Ichigo is surrounded by a powerful gold light, and we see a brief flash of a golden cross before cutting away. As mentioned in my live reaction, I speculate that this golden cross signifies that Ichigo is about to use Getsuga Jujisho once more, which again is significant considering he only uses it once in the source material. But since Yhwach has forced him a long distance from the palace, maybe Ichigo feels safe using such a massive attack. Up next, we see a shot of Yhwach from the side as he channels blue reishi fire into his hand. And while this looks like a new shot, I think this is probably during chapter 618, when we see him lunging for the Soul King only to be blocked by Mimihagi. Now, the very next shot is one of the most interesting of the entire trailer, and one I took a good look at during my live reaction. With a tempest of dust swirling around them, we can see the Schutzstaffel, Askin, Gerard, Hashwolf, Lille, Pernida, and Uryū standing in a line, their arms raised into the air. In front of them all stands Yhwach, his own hand also aloft. Streams of blue light blast into the sky from the outstretched hand of each Schutzstaffel member before raining back down again, the 6 blasts gathering upon Yhwach's hand as he collects their power. So it looks like Yhwach has either demanded their power or they are willingly giving it up to their king, and the Quincy's are all firing their power into the sky before it is then absorbed by Yhwach. We can see that Yhwach is using that collected power to form his glittering blue broadsword, but there's already a couple of odd things about this. Firstly, as we saw earlier, Yhwach already had his broadsword active during his fight with Ichigo, so what happened? Was it destroyed during the battle? And even if it was, why does Yhwach need the Schutzstoffel's help to summon his blade when we know he's perfectly capable of doing it himself? The likely answer is this is a new, much stronger version of the sword, filled with not just Yhwach's power, but the power of his men too. In front of Yhwach, we can see the Soul King's cocoon, or what's left of it anyway. The cocoon is now blood red and has been cut in two, with the bottom half lying on the ground. So this is after Ichigo cut the Soul King in half in chapter 614, and therefore is likely after Ichigo and his friends have already been removed from the palace, meaning this is the Quincy's moment of triumph. Let's take a look at what happens during this sequence in the source material. Well, this particular shot is brand new, but after Ichigo and his friends are removed from the palace, Yhwach immediately begins absorbing Mimihagi after it tries to attack him once again. But that doesn't seem to be happening here at all, at least not yet. Instead, during the trailer, we see Yhwach gather his broadsword in his hand, bringing the sword down in a massive explosion. But wait a minute. On the outside, the royal palace looks absolutely unscathed prior to this huge explosion, when in reality it should be heavily damaged, not just from Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho, but from the fighting in general. The palace is in fact almost hewn in two as Yhwach tears Mimihagi apart earlier on, so what's going on here? Could the shot of this explosion, then, be from a separate, much earlier scene instead? Could this be the result of an attack by Uryū? I know we're all hoping to see Uryū's holy form at some point. Maybe that's what's happening here. So yeah, to put it bluntly, it's all a bit jumbled and weird. I've done my best to construct a coherent timeline of events, but there's likely a fair bit of meddling happening in the trailer to throw us off. Either that, or the palace's spotless finish is another potential error. Anyway, as we move on, we see KYORAKU screaming at something. As pointed out in my live reaction, there's only one thing this can really be. In chapter 622, as Aizen is enlisted to help rescue the Gotei 13 from the Soul King's overflowing power, the traitorous captain prepares to use a massive Hardo 90 to rid the field of the eyeball monsters. Sensing this oncoming power, KYORAKU screams at the rest of the Shinigami to retreat back into the lab, and I assume that's what we're seeing here. Next up, we get our one and only shot of Ukitake in this trailer, the white-haired captain shouting at someone as blood runs down his chin. Unless this is a new scene, then I imagine it's from chapter 616, where Ukitake shouts at a concerned Rukia, telling her to stay back and keep quiet after blood erupts from between his lips. Note the lighting of this shot as well. Ukitake is clearly within Mayuri's light-filled stronghold still, and the lights are still working despite the ceiling having been destroyed. We then see Mimihagi in all its glory as it bursts into life, freed of its circular seal. In case you didn't notice, Mimihagi is sealed in the same way Pernida is. Where Pernida's hand is chained shut with chains linking its fingernails together, Mimihagi's shadowy hand is enclosed by a black circle that loops around it. Only once the circle is shattered does Mimihagi open its fingers fully and ascend to the heavens, which is what we're seeing here in the trailer. I know Ukitake is meant to be getting additional scenes, but I do have to wonder what that will really entail. Remember, chapter 626, The Holy Newborn, was being adapted into episode 6, I believe, meaning Ukitake will be long gone by then. It's likely his spotlight will be around episode 3 or 4. So there really isn't a lot of time for him to do, well, anything. Afterwards, we see a slightly extended version of Hisagi, Ikkaku, and Yumachika taking on the eyeball monsters from chapter 621 as they descend upon the Sternritter. Extended here meaning we might actually see them fight for a little bit. Also, while we don't get to see them too much in this trailer, the eyeball monsters look slightly less distinct than they did in the source material. Here in the anime, they appear to be an almost oil-like mass, a sludge of eyeballs, though I'm sure some of them will take on their full form. Before we continue with the breakdown, however, first a message from today's sponsor. Hello everyone! Despite the weather outside, at least here in the UK anyway, it is technically summer right now. And what better way to get into the summertime mood than with the newest boxes from Tokyo Treat and Sakurako, which, as Mrs. Tomo and I are about to discover, are appropriately themed on tropical island getaways and lively, colourful festivals. So, let's take a look at what's in store. Let's kick things off with Tokyo Treat. Tokyo Treat is a monthly pop Japanese snack subscription box that includes up to 20 seasonal snacks like instant ramen and drinks only available in Japan for a limited time. This month's theme, Okinawa Snackin' Oasis, provides you with a gateway to one of Japan's most popular destinations, making good on Tokyo Treat's mission to bring you a taste of Japan from the comfort of your living room. As a result, this month's box is an eclectic one, filled to the brim with tropical flavours and Okinawan favourites, including Okinawan-style wafu dashi ramen, an Okinawan sea salt donut, and some kamasen crackers, to name a few. The snacks in this month's box have all been hand-picked to really evoke the sensation of being on an island paradise as much as you possibly can, which sounds pretty good to me.
Okay, so the thing I want to try first is the crunchy salty caramel bites. I love salted caramel. I'm more of a fan of salted caramel than Tom.
Yeah, I don't like salted caramel. I'm gonna go
try a Kit Kat.
Yeah, one of the cookies and cream Kit Kats. That's much more my speed.
Oh my god, they're so good.
See, I think the Kit Kat is very nice. So,
you can't
win-win.
That ice cream. It's got that kind of caramel ice creamy flavour. It's good.
Now, for whatever reason, we never try the drinks on camera, but I'm going to change that today with this, what I believe is like an apple soda. What did
it look like? A citrusy drink. Right, so next I think I'm going to try this, which is the Okinawan sea salt donut. It's a lot of salty themed things today, but I'm here for it. I want to try it.
So apparently that sea salt donut was flavoured with sea salt from Miyagi Island in Okinawa.
Meanwhile, Sakurako transports us to Tohoku this month, a place renowned for its captivating festivals where the area's rich culture and tradition is on full display, which makes it perfectly suited to Sakurako. Theme this month is quite simply the Festival of Tohoku, and Sakurako has included a variety of 20 authentic snacks inspired by the confections of the area to help you get into the festive spirit. Some of the snack highlights this month are the apple cream cookie, ginger senbei, and mini shrimp tempura, all of which pair perfectly with this month's included tea, Imon Matcha Genmaicha. Flavours included in this month's box have been chosen to help capture the essence of the region's celebrations. But if that's not enough, this month's tableware item is a Neko Japanese hand towel. It's so cute. Look at the little cats. But yes, moving on to food, I think, first of all, we should start custard pan.
Oh.
So it's nice.
Pan eats bread.
It does. Oh, baked with locally sourced wheat. The moist dough envelops a generous, luscious custard.
Yeah, it smells very strong, actually.
Each bite is a moment of indulgence.
Well, we'll see about that.
There it is. Go for it, sir.
Thank you very much.
Have your pan. It's so sweet.
It's very bready.
Very panny.
Very custardy. Lovely.
So.
Oh no, it's cracked.
You cracked it.
I didn't crack it. It's very delicate, I think.
Well, these are absolutely beautiful. So these are the apple cream cookies that Tom's trying not to break as he gets it out of the packet. We have got another one if it is, but look how beautiful this is. Can you hold it up without breaking? He's attempting.
It's a work of art.
That's so beautiful. And we just don't do biscuits like that here.
There is cream in the middle.
I don't know why.
Look at that.
It kind of reminds me of a cocktail. Do you know what I mean?
Look at the cream. That's very nice. I like that a lot.
It's so fruity. I'm not used to having such a fruity biscuit.
And of course, no matter which box you choose, each one comes with a detailed booklet that tells you everything you need to know about the snacks inside, including allergen information. In fact, the booklets are actually one of the best things about Tokyo Treat and Sakurako. They're evidence of the extra mile they go to make these snack boxes feel as authentic as possible, giving you the lowdown on every item you receive, as well as detailing the history behind each theme and how they're brought to life, both here and in Japan. But that's it for July's summer-themed boxes. As always, I want to say a big thank you to Tokyo Treat and Sakurako for supporting the channel by sponsoring today's video. If you want to treat yourself or someone you know to one of these boxes, then make sure to follow the links either down in the description or the pinned comment and use my code TOMO for $5 off your purchase. Thanks everyone, and enjoy. Okay, back to the trailer then. After the battle against the eyeball monsters, we're treated to another fascinating shot. Renji, wielding his Bankai So Zabimaru, is suddenly surrounded by a golden power as he prepares to face someone or something down. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we don't see Renji use Bankai during this section of the story in the source material. He doesn't bust it out again until the very final battle. So, what's going on here? Well, as I speculated in my live reaction, I think it's pretty obvious he's using his Bankai to fight Gerard in a new extended battle sequence. The purple light on the initial shot of Renji gives away the fact that this scene takes place in Varvelt, and we know that Renji is one of the officers who initially fights Gerard. In the source material, Renji, along with Byakuya, defeats Gerard with ease using just his Shikai, meaning this might be after Gerard has resurrected and grown gigantic for the first time. Now, if they really are doing this, then I'm all for it. In fact, I said in my battle analysis of Gerard's fight that everyone should have been given a chance to shine in waves. The first wave would consist of Renji, Rukia, and Byakuya, and would give us another chance to see both Renji and Rukia's Bankai once more before the series ended. It kind of looks like they might actually be doing that, or something akin to it anyway. At the very least, Renji is using Bankai in Varvelt, and he simply never does that in the source material. What's strange about this, though, is that Gerard doesn't utilize the miracle until chapter 655, which really has got to be about as far as I can see this core going. Now, I could be wrong, of course, but I've long said I think this core will end around chapter 654, or roughly there anyway. I did also speculate that they could bring a cliffhanger forwards from part 4 to end part 3 with, like for example the arrival of Isshin and Ryuken. But if this is actually Renji using Bankai to take on a god-sized Gerard, then we are looking at probably the very end of the core right here. It's possible Renji uses Bankai to fight base Gerard instead, but that would be a little odd, considering he handily defeats him with just Shikai in the source material. Either way, this is exciting, and probably one of the things that excites me the most in this trailer. We've long said that the Gerard fight is in need of some switch-ups, and I'd love to get the chance to see Rukia's Bankai one more time. After all, for many characters, this is their last hurrah. And that goes for the Vizard too, though I'd be surprised to see their assault on Gerard in part 3. I think that's a part 4 thing, probably. Afterwards, we're treated to some scenes from one of the major fights of the arc of part 3, starting with Mayuri leaping from the smoke after detonating his sunsuit to escape Pernida's giant stonewall hands in chapter 638. We then see Mayuri preparing to activate his new, altered Bankai as he draws his sword and brings it to his face. We can also see Mayuri's Hirenkyaku boots active beneath his feet, and if you look very closely, you can see several of Pernida's nerves strewn about on the ground surrounding the captain. Interestingly, they look a lot more realistic than I think I was expecting. They look a lot more realistic than they did in the source material, that's for sure. However, immediately after this, we are treated to something fascinating indeed. Uryū is seen again, only this time he's in Varvelt. Floating through the air, Uryū draws his bow and readies an arrow, aiming it at someone off-screen. This is again a totally new scene, and considering Uryū doesn't fight anyone but Hashwolf much later in the arc, it's got people excited. Who could Uryū be facing off against, especially this early into Varvelt? Is this another clash with Ichigo? The trailer wants you to think he's fighting Mayuri, and that's a possibility, I suppose, though considering Mayuri's state at the end of his battle with Pernida, I'm not sure how that would actually work. Unless Uryū arrives on the scene of the battle to shoot an arrow at an already downed Mayuri, which again I could see. From the way the camera is moving, it almost looks like someone is rushing towards Uryū, so I wonder if he's fighting someone who didn't get to do too much in the source material. Someone like Nell, or one of the Vizard, perhaps. I could see Uryū defeating someone but leaving them alive, a hint towards his true allegiance. It's also possible that this entire scene is something of a misdirect. Perhaps Uryū is moving through the streets, taking out unsuspecting soldat instead. Either way, I'm very happy to see him continue to get more time in the spotlight. Speaking of Uryū, the next shot shows the continuation of his battle with Senjumaru. Again, as you know, this is all brand new stuff that wasn't in the source material at all. Now, interestingly, during this first shot, it kind of looks like the trees of Hikifune's Cage of Life can be seen behind Uryū, which would mean he's already escaped the fabric prison of Senjumaru's Bankai. And yet, the red glow outlining him tells me the fabric prison is at least still around in some capacity. Anyway, we see Uryū skating through the air as Senjumaru's tapestry chases him. It's cool that it's actually Uryū's personal tapestry prison that's following him, as though he's trying to outrun fate itself. As the trailer continues, we hear Uryū telling someone that he's a Quincy, and that's all that matters. While this is technically a new line, I wonder if it's just a slightly changed up version of his response to Ichigo when he coldly tells him that he's a Quincy when Ichigo asks why he's standing with the enemy. We then swap to a different shot, and I think it might be a different scene entirely since Uryū no longer has the red outline. Perhaps this is after Senjumaru's Bankai has been completely disengaged, where his eyes are glowing blue, and sparks of blue vein crackle from them like electricity. This is, again, an intriguing point. In episode 24, in preparation for his battle with the Zero Division, Uryū engaged blue vein across his eyes specifically, but we weren't sure why. And to this day, we still don't really know. But here it looks like he's doing it again, and maybe we'll get an answer as to its purpose. I wonder if it's something weird and abstract, like he's doing it to conceal his true emotions from being visible in his eyes. I don't know, it's almost certainly not going to be that. That's a little too abstract. It's probably just an indicator of when he's about to use the antithesis or something like that. But Uryū then exclaims that the world doesn't need Shinigami, which, while I appreciate the team trying to make Uryū's turn to villainy appear more solidified, is a pretty ridiculous statement considering the cycle of rebirth and all that. If anything, the world doesn't need Quincy's. We then get this really lovely piece of animation where Uryū leaps backwards into the air and conjures a strange-looking bow, unleashing a barrage of glittering blue arrows towards the screen. Considering the lighting again, this is likely during his fight with Ichigo atop the royal palace. It's possible that Uryū has leapt outside the palace itself, hence the blue sky, and is now blasting his arrows inwards, resulting perhaps in that sequence where Ichigo is running away from the explosions. Either way, it's nice that the anime is finally looking to make good on Yhwach's statement that the Sternritter will see Uryū's power in the battles to come. Up next, however, we have another of the most perplexing and eye-catching shots from the trailer. Hashwolf standing before a giant circular red portal. The portal appears to be rippling like water and is found within a chamber that looks purpose-built to house it. As I mentioned in my live reaction, this is completely new. We've never seen anything like it in the source material. However, if I had to guess, then I think this is Hashwolf standing in front of a Gate of the Sun. The Gate of the Sun is a portal system unique to the Vandenreich, though interestingly we never see it explicitly used. At the start of the Varvelt arc, Basby, Lil Toto and Giselle use a Sun Gate to arrive outside Silburn, but we only see the aftermath. We only see Basby's foot standing upon an ornate sun emblem. This led many people to believe that the sun emblem on the floor was in fact the Sun Gate itself, but it may only be some kind of a rival platform. Later, Uryū tries to give Ichigo a sun key to return home. Interestingly, when he gives him the sun key, Uryū explains to Ichigo that you simply have to hold one of these up to a, as he calls it, metal sheet, which will then allow you to travel via a Gate of the Sun, which is perhaps exactly what we will see Hashwolf do in this scene in the 1000-Year Blood War Arc Part 3. And even later than that, we see Isshin and Ryuken using a Sun Key to enter Varvelt via a Gate of the Sun. Once again, we can see the ornate, sun-decorated panel that they seemingly arrive from as the key is dropped to the ground. There doesn't seem to be any room here for a portal, and it does kind of look like they arrive in on this platform of sorts, but I really don't know what else this could be. And of course there are some oddities with this whole system as well. The sun key that Uryū gives Ichigo looks absolutely nothing like the key used by Ryuken and Isshin later on, though that can maybe be attributed to the fact that Ryuken calls it a decades-old pass. In chapter 661, Hashwolf informs Uryū that the Gate of the Sun, which leads to the living world, has already been destroyed. My guess is that's what we're seeing here in the trailer. It's very strange though, because we've never seen anything remotely like this, and there doesn't appear to be any of the Sun Gate iconography around in this shot, but I really can't think it's anything else. After killing Basby, I imagine Hashwolf makes his way to the gate and destroys it, but we'll have to see. Either way, it's exactly the kind of fascinating imagery I was hoping to see in the trailer. Something that takes me totally by surprise. Speaking of Basby, we are treated to a very brief shot of his eye. Considering the hint of a red background and a red outline on his character, this is clearly still down in the transformed Seirete before they arrive in Varvelt. So I'd say this shot is when a defiant Basby tells KYORAKU that they are coming with them to destroy Yhwach. He does look pretty angry here after all, so I think it's likely. We then get a brief shot of each member of the Schutzstaffel, starting with Gerard, who lifts his sword above his head. Considering the lighting of this shot, it looks as though he's still in the regular royal palace right now. But Gerard doesn't actively fight anyone during this segment in the source material. Could it be then that the likes of Chad, Orihime and Ganju are actually going to get a short fight against some or all of the Schutzstaffel? In chapter 620, Ichigo's friends are surrounded by the elite Quincy and ready themselves for battle. Perhaps this is where Gerard prepares to strike. Next up though is a shot that is much easier to identify. We see Pernida at last revealed as the left arm of the Soul King, in what I would argue is the biggest spoiler of the trailer, though as some of you mentioned in the comments of the live reaction, it's highly possible anime-only viewers won't equate this giant hand to the hooded Quincy they've seen so far. This shot of Pernida is of course from the moment its true identity is revealed, as it tears itself free of its hood in chapter 637. Now, I didn't think this was CG upon my initial watch, but apparently it is, and I have to say, I think it's pretty impressive if so. Pernida being CG might be a little weird, considering it is so actively involved in fighting Mayuri, but we'll have to see. It is a strange and uncanny creature, so in some ways I can see it working, and it is in keeping with what they have used CG for so far. What I'm a little more concerned about is how insanely dark this fight is. I have no idea why it is quite so dark, especially when other fights like KYORAKU'S, for example, don't appear to be. Especially when you consider on top of that things are only going to get even darker once KYORAKU activates his BANKAI a few episodes down the line. Maybe the team has purposefully made it this dark to try and disguise some of the oddities of Pernida's CG, I don't know, but we'll have to see how it all plays out. Next, we're treated to a very brief shot of my boy Askin pointing his finger guns at someone off-screen. Again, I'm fairly confident I know what this shot is. In chapter 635, Grimmjow catches up to Askin and tries to attack him, only to strike Askin's heavily poisoned gift ball instead. The Espada collapses to the ground, helpless, and Askin mocks him in this very way, telling him he's in fatal trouble for accepting a gift from a stranger. I have to imagine this is that very same scene, though again, I'm not sure why the background behind Askin is totally pitch black here. Immediately afterwards, we get a really cool shot of Leal as the sniper hides in his vantage point, taking aim at the larger Gote 13 group. Now, this is either also from chapter 635, in which we see Leal picking off Hisagi from afar, though there's no version of this particular angle in the chapter, or it's from chapter 644, at the start of his battle with KYORAKU, when he monologues about how terrifying it must be to not know where your attacker is hiding. Here we get a shot of Leal that is slightly closer to that, but still not quite the same. Interestingly, if I had to compare this shot of Leal to anything, it looks most like his artwork from Bleach Brave Souls. Ultimately, though, I don't think it can be from the fight itself, as Leal is quite clearly still hiding in his sniper's nest here. Immediately after this, we get an amazing shot of Leal activating his Volston dish against KYORAKU in chapter 646, the enormous cross spinning into life in front of the Captain Commander. I will say that the fleur-de-lis tips of the cross simply don't look anywhere near as good or as refined in the trailer as they do in the original chapter, but regardless, the green glow looks extremely cool here. The anime is also depicting it in a slightly more dynamic and interesting way, showing KYORAKU as being dwarfed by the light. I was initially concerned about the green colour, and while I still think it's an odd choice for Leal, it won't be quite as blinding as I first thought. Leal's actual torso when in Zilliel doesn't appear to be made of pure light in the same way his wings are, though I'm not sure what they'll do when he transforms a second time, as his head and arms are made of pure light in his biblical form, and that might look a little weird, but I guess we'll see. Next up, we get a shot of Nanao admonishing Kenpachi from chapter 613. In the source material, Kenpachi wants to go and keep looking for Yachiru, but Kisuke prevents him from leaving the stronghold with Aikido. As a fight looks like it might break out, Nanao steps up into the role of the vice captain of the 1st Division and orders Kenpachi to stay put. Kenpachi, after a tense moment, reluctantly complies. This is definitely the scene we are seeing here in the trailer, and that's definitely Kenpachi that Nanao is confronting. However, the lighting here is all wrong. As we saw earlier during Ukitake's brief shot, and why I brought it up, the lights are still blasting in Mayuri's lab, and yet here the two characters appear to be outside. I wonder if the anime is changing this scene up slightly, and Kenpachi manages to make it past Kisuke's Kido, only to be halted by Nanao on the battlefield instead. This is then followed up by a close-up of Mayuri's face as he lifts his hand, sweat running down his forehead as he quickly reconfigures his arm with rudimentary surgery to protect himself from Pernida's attack at the end of chapter 638. Following this is an extremely brief shot of Nemu's eye from the cliffhanger of chapter 641 as she realises Mayuri is in danger. After this, we see Ichigo struggling to hold back his own arm after Yhwach's power enters his veins, transferred via the Quincy King's sword after Ichigo removes it from Reo in chapter 614, only to then involuntarily cut the Soul King in half mere moments later. At first I wondered where this bright red light was coming from, but then it hit me. It must be the Soul King's cocoon, with Reo having already been stabbed through the chest by Yhwach at the end of his battle with Ichibei. It's a little weird to me, though, that the cocoon would suddenly turn a bright red after being stabbed, unless it's something really morbid like we see the Soul King's blood filling the crystal. Though, does this version of Reo even have blood? Otherwise, it feels a little like an alarm system has been triggered or something, which kind of makes me laugh. Next, we get a great shot of Ichigo pushing Yhwach's arm aside from chapter 618 before he pulls his blade behind him, the tip gleaming gold as Ichigo readies his Getsuga Tensho, the same Getsuga that tears an enormous hole in the palace roof. Interestingly, the Getsuga was coloured black in the original chapter, but I certainly don't think it will be in the anime. And finally, to end the trailer, Ichigo and Yhwach clash, except this isn't a follow-on from the previous scene. Instead, considering they are surrounded by gold and blue Reiatsu, it is likely this is all part of the extended battle between the two that we saw at the start of the trailer, either just before or after Ichigo looked like he was going to use Getsuga Jujisho, with the two of them locking blades in the sky potentially quite far away from the palace itself. And the trailer closes out with a lengthy poem being recited by Yhwach and Hashwolf at the same time, which reads, "Laugh, weigh yourself with hope, for this world is but a scale. When one side is laden with hope, the other must tip into despair. Hence, you must never despair. Wrap yourself in hope as you've never felt before, so that everything other than us can sink into despair." It's an interesting, if bleak, poem, featuring two sides of the same coin, hope and despair, in equal measure. Of course, the notion of a balancing act of a scale is a reference to Hashwolf himself, while the idea of sinking into despair is associated with Yhwach, particularly after he's absorbed the Soul King, and the pleasure he takes in witnessing Ichigo's fall a little later on. It almost sounds like Yhwach talking to Hashwolf in a sense, this idea of everything other than us, reminding me of how Yhwach considers Hashwolf to be his other half, as though they're a single entity against the world. And that is every single frame, every shot, every scene from the newest trailer for the 1000-Year Blood War Arc Anime Part 3, analysed and broken down. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. The trailer covers an awful lot, to be honest, essentially taking us through the entirety of the new season from start to finish. Notable absences, however, include Aizen, of course, who will be a major character in this season and yet didn't appear once in the trailer, as well as other members of Ichigo's party, Grimjo, Neliel, and the Fullbringers, Riruka and Yukio, all of whom we saw in an earlier trailer. There was also no real hint whatsoever to the Friend Saga flashback, save for Hashwolf and Basby appearing one after the other, yet in unrelated scenes. Seemingly anyway. The Vizard also didn't appear in the trailer, and yet we know they play a role in travelling to the Royal Palace. So yeah, there's still loads left to see, including, of course, the battles themselves. Alright guys, but that's it for the video. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it and you found some value in it as well. I hope you managed to take something away from this today. Let me know in the comments below, what was your favourite part of the trailer? What part of the 1000-Year Blood War Arc Anime Part 3 are you the most excited for? And where are you hoping for extended scenes? And what extended scenes are you also looking forward to the most as well? Thank you so very much for your support. As always, I really do appreciate it. And as always, I want to end the video by giving a massive shout out and saying a huge thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters as well. I truly couldn't do this without your support. If you love what I do here over on YouTube and you also want to support me and the channel that extra step, you can do so over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, which gets your name in the credits of every single video just like this. And for $2 and up, you can get every single video of mine absolutely ad-free. Alright everyone, but that's it from me, and until next time I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.